And lastly, we've got the Budapest meeting again, Budapest out of all places, with Orban. That's happening. We don't know when it's happening, if it's happening. I think there's been talk as well about it moving to somewhere else. What could we expect there? Obviously, the one in Alaska didn't go too well. Reports say that Trump just got a history lesson and went out pretty pissed off. Could we see the same thing happening again? Is Putin just trying to gain time, or are we genuinely seeing progress? At least based on the reporting we've seen so far, and at least some of the progress, it does seem there is progress, at least potential for progress.
Yeah, I mean, Putin doesn't need to play for time, or, I mean, Russia's winning. So, I mean, there's no, it's not about, Putin trying to get time or not. Putin
more like
wants to normalize.
Delaying US, like delaying the Tomahawk missiles, for example, by pretending to negotiate.
The Tomahawk missiles were, it's not the actual weapon. It's the United States being there. It forces Putin. The problem with the Tomahawks for Putin was that it would have to force him to retaliate against the United States. And he didn't want to do that because he wants to continue diplomacy with the United States. Not the Tomahawk missile that irks him, right? And once again, I'm talking about non-nuclear. I always have to say the non-nuclear Tomahawk missile, right? Because everyone says, well, it can have a nuclear warhead. Yeah, it could have it. And that's a problem because you don't know. Does this Tomahawk missile have a nuclear warhead that they're launching into Russia? We don't know. But the problem for Putin was that he invested a lot. He overinvested in diplomacy with Trump. And so what the Tomahawk missile would have done, if it had been fired into Russia by the U.S. military, it would have forced Putin's hand to retaliate against the United States. And it could have been a retaliation in different ways. It doesn't mean a military retaliation. It could happen in different formats, a type of retaliation. But diplomacy between the U.S. and Russia would have been over. And for Putin, that would have meant that all the investment that he put into normalizing relations or trying to normalize relations with the United States and with Trump would have come to an end. And I don't think he wanted to see that just yet. But I do think that Budapest is the last chance, not for Russia, for Trump and the United States. I think this is Trump's last off-ramp. This is Trump's last chance to either get a deal in Ukraine along the lines of Istanbul plus June 2024 root causes, which that deal is still on the table, amazingly enough. Russia has shown a lot of flexibility by still having that deal on the table. Either he gets that deal, he agrees to that deal, or the conflict continues. For Trump, this is his last chance. And what Trump could do, if he plays his cards right, he could say, okay, June 2024, that's our framework. Okay, Mr. Putin, I agree, that's our framework. I'm going to pitch it to Zelensky and tell him this is the deal that you should work with. Zelensky's going to refuse it. And that would be an off-ramp for the United States. That would be an off-ramp for Trump to say, I did my best. I got the deal. It was a reasonable deal. Ukraine turned it down. I mean, that's an option for him that he could go to. But this is his last chance to get out of Ukraine one way or another, with a deal or without a deal.
What do you think will happen?
I don't know. Anyone's guess. Who knows? With Trump, very unpredictable. I think we know what Putin wants. Putin wants normalization with the United States. He wants to have a relationship beyond Ukraine. Beyond Ukraine. He wants good relations with the United States, or at least a détente with the United States, for a lot of reasons. There's a START treaty, there's nuclear proliferation, there's a security architecture in Europe, there's the Arctic, there's all kinds of things, fighting terrorism, there's all kinds of things that they need to work together on, that the world would be a better place if
100%.
Those two countries worked
100%.
together. Yeah, so I think Putin sees Ukraine as very important, but part of a bigger puzzle. But Ukraine's a big part, but it's part of a bigger puzzle. So Putin understands that, look, we still have June 2024. Let's give it one more shot. And if we can get June 2024 agreed with the United States, then we can open this thing up to other topics in other areas for both countries as well as for the world. That's what Putin's going to go for. Trump, we'll see. We'll see how he goes into the meeting. We've said it many times over many shows. Very unpredictable how Trump approaches these things. He may even agree to something, and the next day he may wind it all back. I mean, it's very difficult to predict Trump. But I will say this: the fact, if it is in Budapest, it's going to be a very different dynamic the day after. because in Alaska, what Trump did was a huge mistake, a terrible mistake he made, in that he called the Europeans to DC. And then the Europeans came and they started to talk to him, Putin bad, Russia bad, more war, more escalation. We need more sanctions. We need more weapons. And that was a mistake. This time around, he's got Orban there. So I think Orban being there the day after, he can sit down with Trump, or after the meeting, he can sit down with Trump, and Orban can be a voice of reason and tell Trump, look, which Orban has said many times. He's on record saying this: Ukraine is not winning. They're not going to win.
He's been saying it for a long time.
Yeah.
He's been saying it.
They're not going to win. Yeah, they're not going to win. He can tell Trump Europe is crumbling, which he will tell him. Europe is falling apart. Russia's economy is fine. Ukraine is going down, which Orban has said. So, Mr. President, take the deal that Putin is presenting, and let's be done with this. And if Zelensky refuses the deal, then I think Orban will tell President Trump, you need to cut this thing loose. Yeah, that's what I imagine they're going to say.
Yeah, you've said that earlier when we were talking about the. I think there were comments made by someone in the administration about reducing the aid to Eastern European countries, and also the comments by Trump. It seemed like he was starting to hint at washing his hands when he said Europe will protect Ukraine. If you remember that post, a lot of people saw it as Trump pivoting to supporting Ukraine. You saw it as more like washing his hands, because he's very heavily focusing on Europe and NATO and Europe supporting Ukraine without mentioning the US. But going back to that meeting, first, Prime Minister Orban is probably going to be the biggest winner out of that meeting after being ostracized by Brussels. Mm-hmm. But if a peace deal is reached, if you were a betting man, what would it look like? And I would guess, obviously, I'd go by what Washington Post said. Luhansk, Donetsk are essentially part of Russia, or at least not part of Ukraine. And then Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, the line is frozen. That would be my guess if I had to speculate how a deal is reached. And
I would say the Washington Post, I would say no. I would say if Putin was very, very flexible, then I would say if it was something along those lines, maybe something with what he discussed with Witkoff, say, over the summer. There's not going to be a Russian retreat, which would mean Donetsk, Lugansk, and a freeze, not a retreat. But I still don't think that's going to be the case. But I'm saying if there was something like that, a scenario like that playing out, then it definitely would not be the Washington Post, which sees Russia retreating a bit. I don't think that's possible. I think for Putin, that can't happen. I don't think Putin could bring that back to Russia, even if he wanted to. I don't think he could. But maybe 5% chance that maybe Putin says, you know what, I can sell Donetsk, Lugansk, and a freeze in Zaporozhye and Kherson. Not a retreat, but a hard freeze. I still don't think that's going to happen. I think Putin, and there has been no indication at all that he's ready to go back from June 2024. I think that's the minimum, and I think that's the deal that he's going to present, and I don't see him moving back from that. And even that deal, if he were to get it, is going to be controversial in Russia, especially with hardliners, because the hardliners
the four oblasts. So if they get, just for the people that this is getting Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson, obviously Crimea, all four oblasts, some hardliners will still not be happy with that.
Yeah. Well, there's two memorandums actually that they put out. The first one is that one. Remember, I don't know if you remember in I want to say April time period, like after around the time frame of Alaska, the agreement was for both sides to submit memorandums as to how they think the war should wind down, and Russia submitted two options is how they called it. And the first option was that one, which Russia called the straightforward option. And then the other option was Russia called it, I believe, the comprehensive option, or a different option, where it did say, okay, we freeze, we do Donbass, we freeze Kherson, Zaporozhye on the current front lines, but we got elections, no military aid to Ukraine from anybody. That all has to stop.
Elections in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson.
No, elections in Ukraine.
In Ukraine, okay.
That was option number 2. Yeah, option number 1 was what you said.
So option number 2 would be freezing the lines. So they'd be freezing the lines in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson.
Yeah, and then you have all kinds of other conditions. Yeah.
Okay.
Like no military aid.
But that's similar. But
not
that's
the U.S., not Europe.
But that's
elections,
pretty much similar
all
to
these things.
But isn't that similar to what the Washington Post really said? Except Washington Post hinted at Russia ceding territory from Zaporizhia and
Yeah.
Kherson. That's the only
They
difference,
said a
correct?
retreat. That's the difference there. But
Okay.
there were more. The Washington Post didn't go into all of the conditions that option number 2 of Russia had in place, and it had a lot of conditions. I mean, it got into demilitarization. It got into